Hello. All right, guys, we are starting on chapter 9 today. We're way ahead of a lot of people. Chapter 9, lesson 1, talking about rounding fractions. We're still on the fraction, so it hasn't really changed all that much. So 613 to 618. Put your name on it and put your staple right there. All right. So the essential question in this chapter is going to be, how can equivalent fractions help me add and subtract fractions? Because what we're going to eventually build on to are adding and subtracting fractions like, 1/2 plus 1/2. But then eventually you're also going to say like 1/2 plus, let's say, 2/3. All right, so you're going to be doing one with a similar denominator, and you can do one with different denominators at the bottom. So that's what we're eventually going to be building up to. So for this one, rounding fractions, we're going to be using benchmark fractions. And benchmark fractions are just the fractions that we can use to kind of compare where we're at, because you have like 1/2, you have, mainly we're going to be using 1/2 or 1/4, but we're going to be rounding our fractions to 0, 1/2, or 1 today. Kind of an easy lesson, I think, so it shouldn't take us all that long. Example 1, a poison dart frog is 2 inches long. This is equal to 2/12 of a foot. Is 2/12 closest to 0, 1/2, or is it closer to 1? All right. So as you can see down here, we have our benchmark fraction, which is a half, and that's got a 2 on the bottom. So that just means that we're going to have to simplify, or we're going to have to change these into 12s to see where this is at, okay? So when we change 1/2 and we want a 12 on the bottom, like we did in the last chapter, we have to multiply both of these by 6 to get 6/12. So you can see 1/2 is actually like right here, which is 6/12. So then you look on the chart here, on the bar graph or the line graph here, and you say, well, here's 1, 2. This is where 2/12 is going to be. So now you look, what is that closest to? Is it closer to the half? Is it closer to the 0? Or is it closer to the 1? You see right here, it's closer to the 0. So it is closer to 0 on the number line. So the length of the poison dart frog is closest to 0 feet. So obviously it's not very big. Looking down at the bottom, the key concepts of rounding. We have round down. If a numerator is much smaller than the denominator, we round the fraction down. So again, if the numerator right here is a lot smaller, this is much smaller, then we're just going to round it down to 0. Rounding to a half. If the numerator is about half the denominator, we round the fraction to a half. So you can see 6/10. That's pretty close to 5/10, which is a half also. So that's why we're going to say it's going to go to a half. And if the numerator is much larger, almost as large as the denominator, like 9 and a 10, well, we're just going to round that one up to the 1. All right. So we're going to round 4/9 to 0, 1/2, or 1. All right. So the number 4.5 is half of 9. Okay. So we look at the answer 9 right here. We're going to say, well, that's 4.5. So the numerator is 4/9. All right. The numerator in 4/9 is 4. All right. So which is very close to 4.5. So 4/9. We look at this numerator right here. Again, what they said right there, remember 4.5 or 4.5 is pretty close to a half, right? So we're actually going to round this one right here to a half, because 4.5 over 9 would be a half, 1/2. So that's pretty close to a half. So it says graph it on a number line. Well, right here is the half marker again, right? 4/9 is just slightly smaller than that, which would be right there. Like it says, a helpful hint up here. The denominator names the number of units when rounding 4/9. The number line should be divided into 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so let's look down here at the bottom. Okay, so let's do the guided practice here. Again, we're gonna graph it first, and then we're gonna state whether it's closest to 0, half, or a 1. All right, so if you remember on this page right here, look at these examples, and it says if the numerator is much smaller than the denominator, we're going to round to 0. If it's closer to the denominator, then we're going to round it up to 1. So you can see this numerator is pretty close to this denominator, right? So if we look at it, when we split this number line up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places, and we do 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to go right here, right? So as you can see, it's pretty close to 1. So we're going to say that's a 1. 5/8. Again, we look at it and say, well, I know that, let's see, 1, this is split up into 8 spots here, and we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is 5/8 right here. 5/8. As you can see, it's closest to half, and I could tell because half, or 4/8, because right, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This was 4/8, which is a half. That 5 is closest to the 4 than it is to 8/8, which is the 1. So this is going to be close to 1/2. So it says use a number line if needed. We're not going to use a number line because we're going to use the example that it used on the previous page about rounding down, rounding to a half, rounding up based off looking at the numerator or looking at the denominator. So according to this page right here, it says if the numerator is much smaller than the denominator, round to 0. Well, is this numerator much smaller than the denominator? Yes. So that becomes a 0. This one, again, we look at this spot right here and we say if the numerator is about half of the denominator, round the fraction to 1/2. Well, as we said on that previous one, half of 9 is 4.5, right? So that's pretty close to the 5. So we're going to say this is 1/2. Today's secret letter, by the way, we're going to start doing secret letters every single day. And at the end of the chapter, you're going to put these letters together and you're going to unscramble the word and tell me what the word is, and I'll give you extra credit on your math test, all right? And that just keeps you watching these videos, and I'm going to have them in different spots throughout the videos so that you won't just look for one point. So today's secret letter is going to be the letter S. S for, smart, S. So again, the letter is S, so keep that in mind. Number 5. All right, so we're going to look at this last one right here where it says if the numerator is almost as large as the denominator, we round up to 1. So look, 7 is almost as large as 8, so we just say that's a 1. All right. So we look at this one, we say this is a lot smaller than the 7, but if we do half of 7, we get 3.5, right? And that's pretty close to 3, so that means half. We're going to say that's closer to a half. 5, you didn't even see that. 5/11. All right, again, half of 11 is 5.5, and that's pretty close to the 5. So again, you're going to go half. 4/5. This is pretty close to the denominator, right? And we said if the numerator is pretty close to that, it's going to be up to a 1. This is super easy today, isn't it? 1/9. Again, the numerator is way smaller than the 9, so that's going to be close to a 0. 6/7. 6 is pretty close to 7, right? So that's going to be to a 1. See how easy that is? 2/5. Okay, well, it's pretty close, but half of 5 is 2.5, and that's pretty close to each other, right? So we're going to go ahead and say that one is close to a half, because half of that 5 is 2.5, so they're pretty close to one another. 3/8. All right, so again, half of 8 is 4, and that's pretty close to the 3, so we got a half again. 1/5. This is way bigger than that, or that's way smaller than that one, right? So that's going to be a 0, since the numerator is way smaller than the denominator based on this page right here. The numerator is much smaller than the denominator. And this one right here, 15/16. Again, if we look at this right here, the numerator is almost as large as the denominator, so we round up to 1. Looking at the back side, we have round the length of the ribbon, 0, a half, or an inch. So we look at the length of ribbon ends right here. We have a half is here, right? And we have a hole is right there. Which one's it closest to? As you can see, it's closest to this because there's 1, 2, 3 steps there. There's only 1 step there. So this is closer to a half of an inch. Corey has finished about 3/5 of her daily chores. Has she finished about a half of her chores or almost all of her chores? So again, we look at 3/5 right here and we say, well, 3 is pretty close to 5, but 4 would actually be closest. So and it's not way smaller than the 5, so we have to look at it and say, well, I know that half of 5 is 2.5, and that's pretty close to 3. So it looks to me like she has finished about half of her chores. Peter has read 12/5 of his book. Has he read half of his book or almost all of his book? So again, we look at this and we say, well, it's not way far away, so it's definitely not none of his book. Half of 15 is 7.5, and that's not near that. So it looks to me like he's read about almost all of his book. Down here, circle the fraction that does not belong with the other 3. So we look at this one. If we look at this one, this is pretty close to 0 because the numerator is way far away from the numerator or denominator. This one looks like half of that would be 7.5, so it looks like this is half. Looks like this one here, again, half of 13 is 6.5, so that's going to be half again. Looks like half of 12 is 6, so that's pretty close to 5. So it looks like the one that doesn't belong would be this one, right? Because you're going to round down to zeros instead of rounding up to a half like you did on those. So on your guys' homework, again, use a number line if you need to. If you need to say split this up into 9 places, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this is 0, of course, and this would be a whole, and then you just mark out 5/9 because you'd say, well, half of 9 is 4.5, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be half right in here, okay? So then you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be 5/9 right here. So you'd say which one is this close? If you need to use a number line, feel free. But if you use the examples that we used on this page right here, this guide, it should help you pretty much how to answer these fairly easily. Okay. And then on the back side is sort of the same thing as we did on the other one. Again, is it estimate if he ate about half or if he ate almost all. Again, this one, did he do all of the lawn or half the lawn? Again, what is the whole number that's closest to this right here? And this one, you're going to look at the whole number here. Okay, so you're going to look at this right here and determine if that's going to be a 0, a half, or a 1, and you're going to add that to that and tell me what the answer is. And then again, this one here, you're going to ask if it's closer to a half or is it closer to a whole. And the same thing on this one right here. Which one is 3/7 closest to? Is it a 0, a half, or a whole? All right. So just, when you get your name, or when you finish, put your name on it, put it in the box. If you need me, come into Google Meet. If not, come to my desk and I'll help you guys. There's no sense in not asking me for help. I like it when you ask me for help because this is the way this is supposed to work, is by me posting these videos and you doing the work, following along with the work, because this is no different than us being in class right now with me talking about this. You're just not interrupting me, and I'm not having to get after somebody, and we're having a fluid conversation here. So, ask me the questions. I love it when you ask me the questions. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, is for you to learn these items. So, again, thank you guys for listening, and remember the mystery letter that was today. Later.